All right, next person I want to introduce you to is Steve Sherrill. And Steve is going to talk to us about his OM30 Lazy Susan layout. Steve, welcome.
How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful. Now that I'm identified, name on the iPad is my wife's name and not me. So I don't know how that happened, but you know,
I looked for you and couldn't find you, and that's why I made the general statement that I made. I figured if you were there under some other name, you might speak up, which you did. So I'm glad we got together.
yes. Well, I've been running trains now for 75 years. So I've been through a lot of different things as far as the evolutions. And right now I have a 24 by 32 completed ON30 railroad in a separate building. I've started building these little micro or small layouts just as a kind of a little knack. Larry Knapp kind of got me involved in this and interested. So I've got one here that I wanted to introduce some new things that you don't see very often in American railroading. You see a lot of it in European models because they're used to having smaller spaces, and so they have to improvise. One of the things is sector plates. Sector plates replace a lot of switches. They're just actually movable sections of track. And so on this particular layout, which is 21 by 40 inches, I have two re-railers that I've used as sector plates. And I kind of got, I noticed these in an old Atlas catalog in a layout book. They've had a turntable, which they made with a 9-inch section of track, and they put a nail in it. Well, nobody ever did that, you know, so that was no good. But what I did with this was the same concept, except I put a rail spike at the end so you get the movement. Bob Gelmacher is a friend of mine. He made a little device that goes in between the tracks and extends out, and I put a little knob on the end of it so that I could move it. I have stops so that the track does not go too far. It stays aligned with nothing more than spikes. Now, this layout has an 8-inch radius curve, which definitely limits what you can do. If you look at most of these micro layouts, and most layouts in particular, you only see one side of the layout. And I said, you know, that's a shame because we have a tendency to actually model things that we don't see, the backs of buildings and things like that. And so what I wanted to do was to create something that actually allowed you to use both sides of a layout. And so this being a small layout, limited number of cars, it's got 3 switches, two sector plates and 1 stub switch, which I made out of a Atlas snap switch. It's very simple, and I will show that in this operation, which I get to sort cars and move around to the other side. You can see that by having it on a Lazy Susan, I can turn this, and we have an entire other railroad here. And because this locomotive runs so slow and nice, I've got it around the locomotive that's just now coming around the corner onto the new part of the railroad, which I'm going to switch into a little freight station and a tipple. So because it's a small layout, there's not much room. You have to use really small buildings. And so what I actually did was I used HO buildings, and this is an HO plastic mill, And so what I wanted to do with this was to also make it easy for people who are just starting out to realize that they don't have to get the real expensive kits. They can modify some of the other cheaper plastic built kits and still be acceptable. And this would be an introduction into a later development. So the layout is just created like we use the other things that we use. The styrofoam for bases. This is on a 2-inch piece of styrofoam with cabinet backer for support. A 12-inch Lazy Susan from Walmart. And this type of wheel that goes underneath. It's a ball bearing type of wheel. And they cost like $1. So it's 4 of those. And it all balances. You can see there's hardly any play, and it spins very nicely. It also gives you a look where you can see it, and I'll turn this toward the camera. You now get to see a different view of a layout. I get to see this north and south. It's running toward me and away from me. And I also get to see both sides of the layout. So it's a whole different concept. And I haven't seen this. And I believe me, I've looked at a lot of YouTubes. But it's something really kind of neat as far as not being large, but being able to utilize both sides. And here's my stub switch I made. I might be able to demonstrate that at a later date, show how I made that. It's very simple. And since these old switches are really cheap at train shows, you know, we can pick those up for sometimes $2 or $3. And it's easy to just modify one. And instead of a 9-inch section, you knock it down to 3 inches. And very compact. And, you know, all my switches are thrown with the ground throws, the caboose industry ground throws, and it's just straight HO code 100 track, held together with spikes. But the 8-inch radius really limits the size of what you have here. Bob Gelmacher made all these 3D cars, and I go to a train show and I will buy used or old HO box cars that have sprung trucks for $2 or $3, take the trucks off and the couplers and transfer them onto these. So it's an inexpensive way of having the hobby and not breaking the bank.
I think it's a unique concept. I really do appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us about it, Steve, because I've never heard anybody have one of these.
Well, you have to, I'm telling you, you have to sit down and operate this to realize how much fun it is with 2 or 3 cars. There's so much operation here. You really can't get the whole grasp of it unless you're down here running it. And you have to have a nice locomotive that runs nice and slow so that you can just turn it, you know, and I'm not turning it fast. I'm not trying to beat the locomotive. And it turns so easy on that Lazy Susan.
What kind of locomotive do you have there?
That's just a Bachman Davenport. And it's got, now this is, I'm battery powered. So, you know, I'm 100% battery powered on my both layouts. So I have no wiring issues at all. I think I've got 19 or 20 battery powered locomotives now. And I'm very satisfied. Each one has their own controller. Right now I'm into RC car batteries to move the trains. And they're only like $20 for the whole set to do this. So this could be as inexpensive as you want to make it, or you can go, you know, expensive and have a lot of electronics. I choose to not do that. I've been in there already. And I just think it's simpler is much better.
Does anybody have any questions about this for Steve?
Yeah, Steve, I think I missed something about the 8-inch radius curves. Is that flex track or are they section tracks?
No, it's flex.
Okay,
It's all flex. It's 3-foot section, Atlas Code 100. Okay, 3 switches. Even the a little what I use for sector plates is nothing but the re-railers, because I use HO trucks underneath these cars. It's very difficult to re-rail them should they come off, of course, which never happens. But you have a re-railer right here, and you're re-railing it. It's a part of the layout.
it's all a great concept, especially the stub switches. I've done a few sub switches like that with old Atlas turnouts, and it is a lot of fun. I will attest to that.
Well, I've got another one that I'm building that won't have, well, I can put a Lady Susan under it, but it's got no switches. And yet I'll be able, I made a turntable out of a DVD, out of a disc of DVD. So that's kind of unique too. And I'll show that one day too. But this, you can't even tell, this is the only O-scale structure on the whole thing. Everything else is HO. You can't tell because in the perspective is everything is smaller, but it's still 1/4 inch, you know? And like, I have the, this is what I call a good enough switch stand. It's made with a push pin that I've ground down and just a punch on a piece of red paper. And so it's good enough. It'll stand in place until I get something better. And I do a lot of that kind of thing. You know, the trees, most of the trees are commercial, but I've got all the foam and the what you see covering the ground. It just, I went to a sale and for $1 a pack, I got these. You know, it's out there if you want to be conservative with your funds.
Steve?
Do it.
Steve, if I wanted to build that layout, how much money should I have as a budget, do you think? Can I build that for $100?
Yes.
Engine and everything?
No. No, you can't build the engine. I mean, the engine, right now, those engines are skyrocketing. They're like $150, you know?
Yeah.
Steve, what brand of radio control you're using?
This is Deltang. It's an English, made in England.
Huh.
And it runs with 3.7 volts. It's got, I think this one got 600 milliamps in it. And
Wow.
it'll run for 2 or 3 hours.
Hmm.
It does not have sound. It won't support sound. I've found out over the years that all sound does for me and the people that I operate with, it just makes noise. And if I have somebody I'm next to, I can't talk over it most of the time. And so my group had just said, sound is out. We don't want sound. I do have some equipment with sounds. If somebody comes over, I will turn it on. Otherwise, there's no sound.
It's good to see an emphasis on how much fun you can have if you don't get too compulsive about everything in this hobby that is supposed to be right. You know, HO buildings with O-scale buildings, it works for you. It's more fun than being compulsively chasing something, especially for a little tabletop like that.
I was sitting in my building one day and I said, you know, I was losing interest. And I said, it was on a Thursday. And I said, you know, I just need to go in a little different direction. I said, I want to sell all my cars, all my standard length cars, even though they were narrow gauge, they were the standard Bachmann cars. And I had 81 cars. And I made one phone call and sold all 81. And then I started with the shorties, all the 3D prints and things like that. And I had to kit bash and create things. And so it's got me inspired again.
Wow.
You know, I've been in On30 for years. And so it's just everything is kit bashed now. From HO, we make some, you know, put bigger parts on it, and the mechanisms are good. And I've used some of these old mechanisms from the 70s that had brass wheels. Well, you don't have to worry about any dirt on them with battery power, you know.
Yeah.
But the good thing about battery power is you actually have to control the locomotive. You have to make it go faster. You have to make it go slower. You have to be aware of the load behind the engine, pushing it down a hill. The weight going up the hill. I mean, you're actually in complete control of that locomotive. It's not an electronic thing that runs itself. So are there any questions of, you know?
Steve, Larry McDonald up here in Canada. Do you charge through the rails or do you take them off?
Nope.
To charge them?
All the batteries are taken out.
Oh,
It's very simple. What I've found is it makes it so much simpler to take it away from the board. In other words, when it comes around here, I'll take the top off and you can see what's involved here. I also have a lot of the radio control equipment in any gondola or some other car behind the locomotive. And so it's just a matter of unhooking that car and charging it through a connection on the car. So if we look at this, if you can see, here's the battery. Okay. I don't know, can you see that?
No, I can't.
no.
Can you see the green light? Can you see the green light, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, that shows that it's bound up. All
Okay.
right. And here's how big that is. That's the entire length. What makes this go is right here. Where?
Put it right there.
Right there. See how long that is?
Yeah.
That's 2 wires to the motor, 2 wires to the battery, and I have movement. Okay,
Right.
now that's for this kind. But all battery control basically is 2 wires to the motor, 2 wires to the battery. After that, you can do whatever you want as far as how you want to charge it and the size of battery that you want. If it's supported by the receiver.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm missing something. Where's the receiver? Right by
Right
the
here.
right by the motor. Okay. Well,
This
that's
is the receiver. It's this long. It's less than it's about 1/2 inch long.
yeah, I've never seen one that small.
Oh, this small.
And that what's the make of the receivers?
Deltang.
Deltang. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll uncover it for you. Can you see it? Can you see it, Mark?
Come up a little bit.
Yep.
And right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's just, and that's when that light is on, it's bound.
Huh.
I haven't seen one that small. Wow.
Well, that's about as small as they get. And that'll support 1 amp. All right. So some of them, I could put 7.4 volts through this But why? It's not gonna make it any, all it does is give more power and makes it go faster. And use battery more. So by controlling the amount of voltage, you control the speed amount. And by putting more milliamps in, you get longevity.
Thank you.
This is the transmitters.
You know, one thing I'd never realized until you said it, Steve, is that using battery power really does put you in a much more the same position as a real engineer running that crane rather than turning the on-off switch on a transformer.
Yes, it does. It also, you know, you can't make it go in reverse. You can't reverse direction until you have to take all the power away from it. So you know how on DCC, I believe it's the same way. But in DC, you can reverse it and strip the gears, type of thing. So you don't put nearly amount of stress on the gearing, and it's just wonderful. I mean, I knew for a long time we had this in G scale in the '80s, and when I saw that, I knew that that's what I wanted. But it took it a while before it got small enough.
Yeah.
You know.
Anybody else have questions for Steve?
Steve, will you have this at Harrisburg show in June?
Yes.
Great. See you there. Thank you.
I'll have this one there. It also, I also run all my accessories off of batteries, including with the switch machines that I have. You know, I don't rely on electric power for anything. It's just much easier to do it that way. And you'd be surprised, like for a water fill or something like that, if you put a 9-volt battery on it, it'll last you 3 years. You know, the Morse code in the stations, you know, they just last forever. I mean,
Yeah.
It's unbelievable how long these things last.
Well, listen, if you would like to, I'd love for you to come back and show us how to make one of those stub switches. That's fascinating to me. So
Well,
if you'd be willing to do that, I'll give you a call and we'll set up a time.
Okay.
That's
I could
great.
do that. I've actually got some other things I could throw in there at the same time. The stub switch won't take but 2 minutes.
That's
You know?
fine. That's fine. Then we'll throw those in there too.
You know, but I can show you the next micro layout I'm making. It's kind of neat. And it's only 21 inches long. So you carry that around like a booklet, you know?
Yeah. Steve, thanks so much for being here. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be in touch with you.
Okay. I want to thank my neighbor too for being my cameraman.
He did a great job. Thanks so
All
much.
right.
Thanks so
All right,
much.
bye.
Yes, sir.